my nighttime park stalker. At the time that this happened, I was a 13-year-old female. So, this happened a couple of years ago and I was fairly naive. I was a major introvert, only friends with a few people in my class, the usual thing. I wanted to be social, but I preferred to be alone and read or write. Classic nerd things. In early November, I got a text on my phone that was from a few classmates whose phone numbers I had, and around one or two I just couldn't recognize. It was a group chat asking if we wanted to hang out at night near a park at our school. My parents, being strict and paranoid as usual, would never let me go. Luckily, or what I thought was luck, they were heading out for an overnight trip. They would be back around 4 in the morning. Everything fell into place. Once my parents left, around 8ish, 8 o'clock or something like that, I ran out to the door and made my way to the park. The one thing I made sure to do was lock the door. My parents were paranoid after all, and it was their biggest thing that they engraved into me. Once I arrived at the park, I noticed a creepy figure near the edge of the woods. No one else seemed to notice, and I already had enough reputation as a weirdo who was obsessed with true crime. However, I did not mention that particular obsession of mine. The night drew on, and I was having the time of my life, ignoring the gut feeling I had telling me to run. Every so often I would look over my shoulder and the man would still be standing there. Around 9:45, 4 out of the 10 people there had to leave due to their curfew. It was getting cold and it was nearly pitch black with a few street lights every so often. The rest of us decided to go as well, since it felt more eerie and quiet. The place that we were hanging out at was a field that was fenced in with a few exits and entrances. A large wide field with a small park in the back and our giant middle school right behind us. The front of the field faced the empty road, and the right and left sides were surrounded by forest. All of the people left, and we were a few. All of the people left were getting picked up by cars, meaning that they went the opposite way of the road, since that's where the parking lot was. That man stood by the right forest road exit that I needed to take to get home. I walked away from my group and I tried to steady my heavy breathing. I did not want to be paranoid, but all the true crime I listened to was catching up to me. The man was probably in his early 40s or late 30s, dark hair with a beard, and he was probably around 5'9", which is roughly 1 meter and 75 centimeters. But at the same time it seemed like almost 2 meters, which is 6 feet. He stood about 10 feet from the exit that I had to take, so when I got close enough to it, I ran for about 30 feet through the exit and through the woods. Once I felt safe enough, I started just to quickly walk through the woods, or at least get to the road. I heard a snap and a crunch from behind me. Stopped walking for a second and I quickly checked over my shoulder. Around 15 feet behind me stood the very same man. For the people that are not from the US, that's approximately 4 meters and a half. He was walking slowly behind me, almost as if he was trying not to be suspicious, but it only made my fear worse. I turned around and I walked so quickly. I was basically jogging. I live about 10 minutes away from the park that we hung out, and I wasn't very athletic enough. I was not very athletic to run home. After around 7 minutes of walking so fast, I was in my neighborhood. I knew that I could run to my house if I had to, so I checked to see if he was still trailing behind me. To my horror, he was only 5 feet away, and I ran faster than I ever ran. I could hear his footsteps behind me thumping across the concrete as he ran too. I dove down an alleyway, and I knew well, and I tried to lose him in a park, making my way home only longer. I could hear his heavy breath followed by his footsteps as he tried to keep up. I cut through houses, backyards, and front yards. I finally made it to my house, and I flew up the steps. I looked behind me, and he had just arrived at the bottom of my stairs. I unlocked the door, and I burst through it, shoving it closed behind me, and I heard him hit the door with his whole body. I ran around the house, and I locked all the windows, turned off all the lights, and I hid in my bedroom with a kitchen knife, just in case he got in. Luckily, he didn't. If this was a better world, that's where my story would end, but it doesn't. After a few months, I haven't really told anyone about this. I haven't really told anyone what has happened since. I don't want to get in trouble with my parents for sneaking out or anything. I didn't go out with anyone or any group anymore, and my loner status returned. I began to write horror stories as a coping mechanism, and I never went out past 7 o'clock, in the evening of course. It was around February when a classmate of mine was sharing a story of some random man following her home from the bus. By which, I mean that he was just waiting there a few feet away, or a few meters away from the bus, looking at her directly. She did describe him almost the exact same as the man who had chased me home. Another girl mentioned that he sounded like the guy who stood outside the school and tried to follow her home. I didn't join in, but everyone agreed that he was just a very weird guy. He was kind of forgotten, and eventually I moved on too. Around May, I was getting ready to walk to school when my mom pulled me aside and showed me a picture of a man. The guy who stalked me, actually. She told me that he had been taken into custody 2 weeks ago for sexually assaulting a child and had escaped last night. She told me to keep an eye out for him and to call the cops if I saw him. I was shaking the whole time I walked to school. It haunts me to know that if he had caught me, I would most likely be in her position or even dead. So, creepy night stalker who liked to hunt down young girls and assault them physically and carnally, let's not meet again.